Well, hello, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today, and a very warm welcome to you as we start our webinar from Lead to Loyalty, Customer Retention and Wholesale. Now, we've chosen this topic today because in wholesale, we often focus very heavily on customer acquisition, which of course is the right thing to do. But with so many wholesalers upping their digital game, competition is always just a click away, isn't it? And it's not just about winning new business. Real long-term value, of course, comes from holding on to your customers and keeping them loyal. And that's the real challenge. So today, with the help of our panelists, who all have plenty of experience in this area, we're going to explore what it really takes to earn your customers' loyalty and make them long-term partners. So just before I give the chance to our panelists to introduce themselves, just to let you know how we're going to structure the time this afternoon, we're probably going to spend about the next half an hour or so talking to the panelists so they can share their views on some of the topics we're going to bring up. But we've kept about 10-15 minutes at the end of the session for you to contribute your own questions, which the panelists will be happy to answer. So if you just can, during the session, please just keep adding questions as they come to mind. So I'm sure you're familiar with Zoom, but at the bottom of your screens, you'll see a little Q&A icon. It'll call out with a question mark, and it just click on that, and you can add your questions in there. So please, anything that you need to know, we'd be very happy to answer. So as I said, I'm joined today by 4 specialists who all have very deep experience in this area. And to kick things off this afternoon, I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves, and we'll start, ladies first, with yourself, Britta.
Thank you, Gavin. So I'm Britta Ashu. I work as the head of digital marketing at Bidfood. I've been with Bidfood for 12, 13 years, but I've been in the food and drink industry for marketing specifically for closer to 25 years, terrifyingly. Love the industry, clearly very people-led, and may that always be the case. But digital, I guess, even before the 2020 sort of experiences that we shall never speak of again, was becoming a massive part of how we engage with customers. And it's been an interesting journey so far, and undoubtedly will continue to be. So happy to be here. Thanks for the invite, Kevin.
Thank you so much, Britta, for joining us. Chris Palmer, over to you.
Okay. Hi, guys. I'm Chris Palmer. I am the product manager for e-commerce and loyalty at Henderson Foodservice. So I look after our Adobe e-commerce platform, which obviously has to be heavily adapted to move out of the B2C field into what we need in B2B food service. So that platform's been up and running for coming up on 5 years now, and is now the single largest ordering platform or ordering source of orders coming into the business. So it's been quite a lot of digital transformation has gone alongside that in order to bring that into the business.
Fantastic. Thanks, Chris. Over to you, Chris Davies.
Hello, everyone. As Gavin says, Chris Davies. I'm the managing director at an agency called Omne. And the agency is an integrated marketing agency, specialist in food, beverage, but particularly food service, and has been for 25 years now. The agency does one thing, it's support our clients in driving towards growth. And so we see our role in helping them strategically identify growth, put the tools, tactics, and strategies in place to then unlock that identified growth opportunity, and then they're onwardly help accelerate growth there afterwards in whatever way that needs to be done. But that's how we fit and sit into all of this, and looking forward to participating. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chris. And over to you, Dave.
I am Dave Shield. I work with Gavin at BCP, and I'm the product owner of Oporteo, which is our digital online platform. And I've worked on that for about 5 years now, and I work very closely with our customers in food and drink to help see how to define the platform to best solve any issues or business challenges that they have.
Thanks very much, Dave. Well, let's crack on and jump into our topics this afternoon. So and hear from our panelists. And Chris Palmer, if I could ask you to kick us off with the first question. So in a price-driven and competitive wholesale market, what drives customer loyalty beyond product and price? how can wholesalers adapt their e-commerce strategy and customer experience to successfully leverage these opportunities and successfully build loyalty?
Okay, so I think where I'd start with that particular question is probably actually around what do we actually mean by loyalty. We've been doing some internal research with our internal users recently, and there was quite an interesting discussion around kind of Schrodinger's loyalty. The fact that we expect our customers to be loyal to us at the same time as we expect them to be less disloyal to anybody else that they are ordering from, and we expect those things to coexist side by side. So, often actually what we're seeing when we talk about loyalty and when we talk about kind of competing for loyalty, what we actually see is that kind of is the customer getting involved in that kind of game of price and pricing models and service levels and competing against suppliers, competing against each other in that field. And what we see is loyalty, which to them is getting the best deal at any given moment in time. And certainly we do see customers that move between suppliers and do kind of play them off against each other. So there's a question from at my end of what does loyalty actually mean, particularly in the food service business. And really it comes down to what are the things that are going to make you different, but also can you see that through? Can you actually live up to that promise that you are putting out there when you are acquiring a customer or re-winning a customer? What are the things that you are telling them, and does that actually bear resemblance to the reality of the situation? Because if you can't live up to your promises, it doesn't, you can have your loyalty schemes and your benefits and your rebates and your nifty user experience online, but actually those things don't really matter if you don't live up to the promise of what it is that you said you would deliver to the customer. In the e-commerce world, the hard bit about living up to those promises is that you're actually at the end of that process. So you are living up not just to your promise around an e-commerce experience, but you're living up to the promises of the entire business. We talk a lot about how our website is the window into our business. If something doesn't work somewhere along the process, from a product coming in to going out to the customer, it's highly likely the customer will become aware of that by using our website. So we have to live up to everybody's promise in that respect, which means you have to be integrated into your business, and you have to be engaging right across the board with all of the different departments around you in order to make that work. I think specifically then within the e-commerce sphere, you're talking about, are you doing the hard work to make your relationship with that customer as frictionless as possible? And I suppose the two sides of that coin for me are you putting in the hard work to understand your customer in order to put the most relevant products in front of them, to put the most relevant content, and get them engaging with you? So on the customer side, it's about, do you know them, and are you taking the right measures to engage them? But also then, in terms of your functionality, are you doing the work to remove those pain points and reduce the effort for the customer in order to make it as frictionless and as easy as possible? And a good example of that, which is one of the things that I think sets us apart from our competitors, is around things that aren't available for next day delivery, what we would refer to as pre-order products. Now, some of our competitors, you have to order them in two completely separate orders or two completely separate delivery dates. We put the extra shift in order to build that into one basket flow, one checkout flow, in order to take that work and thought and pain point off the customer. And yes, it was harder for us to take the product to market, but it was worth it in the end because it's an easier buying experience.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much, Chris. And it's quite interesting there how you say how your whole website and the e-commerce experience is that window on on the world of the business, and the laser focus sort of coming through through on that. And I think the other points which I think are really key there as well is the fact that you've really got to think about what's relevant to the customer and those pain points, and you know, what are the sort of right buttons that you're pushing in a sense for the customer, and how you bring that to life. And obviously very clear evidence of thought that's gone on within your business to kind of make that the top end of the experience that it can. If I can hand over to you, Dave, what are your thoughts on that, on the question?
I completely agree with Chris Palmer's points. I think when price and products are near identical across competitors, I think your differentiating factor is the ease of doing business. You know, your customers are busy, they're often managing dozens of supplier relationships. So by saving them time, reducing friction, and minimizing their risk, you're increasing their loyalty to your business. So I was reading a Accenture article the other day about loyalty of B2B businesses, and I think one of the numbers was 80% of B2B buyers have said that they've switched suppliers in the last 24 months, which is a staggering amount. And it comes down to mainly, this research found, two issues. One is the digital imbalance. So some wholesalers may over-automate and you lose that personal touch, which gives you, you know, that differentiating factor, and others who cling to the old ways, you know, as much as possible and fall behind digitally. So, you know, people who do well and see the most success do well at both of those. I think the other point that they found was internal mismanagement. So 70% of the poorly performing wholesalers in the study cited that there was a cultural resistance from leadership to a blocker to customer-centric digital development, whereas the top performers had much more buy-in from the executives. So it's an internal transformation that is needed within the business to make it a success. So, I mean, from that, I mean, I think looking at that, how do you reduce friction? So I think there's probably three areas which I'd say, you know, I would start looking at is one, streamline your expert buying experience. So people who know what they're going to buy. So things like quick ordering, saved lists, and product search. They're fairly basic things to set up on your site, but can really decrease that friction. Make sure that you have customer specific portals so they don't have to call you up to get any information, that you know, they can go on your website, get their contract pricing, returns, past orders, and any other promotions which help them to find what they need faster. And then also ensure that you have your real-time stock and price availability. So one of the biggest customer frustration is, you know, placing an order and finding it doesn't turn up to your door. So making sure that you've got all of that right.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I think there's quite a fascinating statistic that you told us about there. I mean, 80% of B2B buyers who potentially switched suppliers in the last 2 years. I mean, that just kind of shows the kind of risk to churn that there is. But I think something which I thought was really quite key there is that you really sort of hit on some key, if you like, levers around you know, just things that can make customers happy quite quickly in terms of their e-commerce experience. And that is, if you know you want to buy, or you're buying the same thing over and over again, make it frictionless, let them get in and get out quickly, and so on. And you know, just that balance between full automation and feeling perhaps very impersonal, and on the other end of the scale, making it too manual. So there is a kind of sweet spot in the middle. So yeah, thanks, Dave. Some really good stuff there, and some good pointers. So if we could move over to yourself, Britta, please, to answer the question.
Sure. Sort of in short, aligned with a lot of the stuff that's been said already, but I think a lot of this is about building trust. So as Chris was alluding to, you know, that starts really early. If you don't deliver on the customer promise you make early doors, then the long-term loyalty is difficult to build up. Digital marketing, things like social media and websites being a window into the business, obviously give you a really good opportunity to not just talk about price and promotion and product, but also kind of behind the scenes a little bit. Who are the people that work in the business? Are you showcasing people that people can relate to and feel are credible sort of people to work with? And I think that need doesn't go away because you trade online. I think the online experience should be as slick, if not slicker, than what you'd expect and sort of accept as an offline experience. So again, back to Chris's example of, you know, having it all in one place, in one order, one basket. You'd never go to a supermarket and expect to have to go to 2 different tills to pay for things. It just wouldn't happen. So why would you have it on an e-commerce platform? I think constantly almost like walking through your experience as if you were that customer is one of the key ways to identify where those bumps are. The opportunity, of course, with digital also is that you are accessible 24/7, 365. So if we think about understanding our customers and knowing who we're working with, you know, I work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 loosely. Most pubs, restaurants, hotels work in a very different pattern. So if you are at a time where they can't pick up a phone and ring you, have you got the right FAQs on your website? Are you making all the right noises and making sure that people don't sort of hit those bumps out of hours where they don't really have a plan B for placing their order? So another incentive, I think, to really make sure that journey is as slick and as seamless as possible is the accessibility for an industry that is you know, round the clock. I think a lot of what we do in our industry is about building partnerships. The challenge in many ways from a digital marketeer's point of view and sort of top of funnel is that you have got very short snippets to try and show where your strengths are, what your point of difference is. People have you know, very short attention spans when it comes to even watching videos or you know, whatever it is. So really making good use of that opportunity to engage with people and making sure you are really highlighting what your USPs are and why people should trust you. But then, as it's been said so much already, absolutely have to live up to it. Otherwise, you've lost them before they've walked through the door. I think it is a personal relationship still. I don't think that goes away because of e-commerce. So it's where the opportunities are to make those things personalized as well. I think for us, sectors is probably the level of personalization to a large extent that's sort of relatively easy to get to. So how are you talking to a care home versus a 5-star restaurant? Slightly different conversations, different needs, different requirements. I would say with personalization, the watch out for me with that is if you take it too far and you get it wrong, I would argue it's worse than not doing it at all. So it's finding the fine line between making people feel like they are still engaging with a business that is welcoming and understanding of their needs without, I'm sure we've all had emails that said, "Dear, insert first name." Not sure that's a brilliant experience. Or, you know, as Mercedes used to email me all the time calling me Mr. Ashu, which also I thought was an interesting experience. So I think, you know, if you get personalization right, it's absolutely something to explore. But I would be very mindful of drawing the line where you're dipping into to potentially taking it too far. And then just bearing in mind that loyalty online really isn't that different to loyalty offline. Do what you say you're going to do. Be open and transparent about it. If something goes wrong, do your best to fix it. People still want to deal with people. I don't think any of us would ever claim to have done everything 100%, but it's about how you then tackle it, what you do to put it right, because it all helps build up that trust ongoing. We're all in this for partnerships. We're not, you know, B2B, if you sell printers, is potentially one purchase and then I don't hear from you for another 5 years. In food and drink wholesale, it's just not like that. You know, we're talking 2 or 3 orders a week. So it is really about finding ways to build up those partnerships, even though it is a B2B scenario, as it were.
Oh, that's great. So I think it's quite interesting how, you know, that kind of walk in your customer's shoes mindset is actually really clever, because it is about sort of really understanding, and it's going to be different for each channel, you know, what is, you know, what matters to them, kind of thing. The other thing, which I thought,
if it's not okay offline, then it's not okay online, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think the other thing, which is quite interesting as well, is just that the point you make, and actually how you have those short moments of exposure to kind of demonstrate, you know, all of this to your customer, and you've really got to kind of get the most leverage you can out of all those points. But I think most of all, and as you say, the common thread here, because I think Chris Palmer mentioned it just now as well, this whole thing about authenticity. You can't pretend that you're something which you're not, and you know that your customers will see through that immediately if you're not being who you are.
And they'll tell everybody. They're not just going to address it with you necessarily. They're not necessarily the quiet walk away that you might have had before social media. Odds are words is going to spread if you do too much of that.
Yeah, very open world out there. And Chris, what are your thoughts on this?
Oh, goodness, fascinating. I think my lens is complementary, but a little different. For context, we, on behalf of Bidfood, conceived roughly 13, 14 years ago, and today continue to run the Safari Rewards loyalty program. And for those who don't know, that I guess the most concise way of bringing to life what that is, it's the Tesco's club card of the B2B food service world, where depending on the basket of points that an operator chooses to, a basket of products that an operator chooses to buy, they can achieve points which are auto-attributed, and they can build their points depending on what they choose to purchase, whether they choose to purchase in new and exciting innovations, what activities they perform, how they contribute to the community, etc., etc. There's lots of interesting features. The whole intent is to support the operators that are engaging and proving most loyal and consolidating as much basket within Bidfood's world as possible by reinvesting back in their business. And the program boasts incredible engagement, whether that's digital or email engagement, lots of exciting stats, which I won't bore you with now. But the one stat that strikes me perhaps more than any other is that of the millions of points that customers are earning, 96% of them are redeemed, to which customers are then yielding an actual reward. And so many loyalty programs, regardless of sector, focus on the accrual of reward. So you feel like, oh, I'm going to earn something, but then there's never any redemption that lives with that, and therefore no loyalty and goodwill is actually attributed back to the brand who's issued the potential opportunity. But in Bidfood's case, and the work we're doing with and for them, 96% of all customers, and that's reinvesting back into the business. And if I touch on Chris's point, and Gav, you cleared it up as well there, about authenticity and what are the things that make you different, and can you live up to that? If the language is about helping you grow your business and there's a mutuality of growth, for me, demonstrating about that redemption percentage and the fact that then those points are spent on things that aid the business, or to recognize and engage the team by making sure they feel loyal and invested, is for me a really important part. And Britta, you touched on something right at the start about food service being a very people-led area, and of course we couldn't agree more. And whilst the Safari Rewards loyalty program is, of course, a complementary digital experience in its main, I think it's worth noting that rather than just being a bot-based, quite transactional interaction, it is the antithesis of that. There is a customer services team who are building relationships with customers who are indoctrinated and picking up the phone. For key customers, there is concierge services, so they can maximize the value of their points and get things that are personal and bespoke to them that will really help their business. And those are the things I think that do start to meaningfully evidence that you are really trying to support them in the growth of what they're trying to achieve. You are a partner for the long term. And if there is a hiccup, whatever that hiccup might be, you start to have a solution that adds goodwill, therefore makes you more grippy. I'd like to think makes you more sticky by that, I guess, digital and cohesively human interaction, I guess.
Oh, that's great, Chris. And what's really interesting there is that sort of high rate of redemption, which must really demonstrate that customers see a lot of value in that. And I think, again, there's a sort of common thread coming through here, is that value goes beyond just the price of something, doesn't it? It's that experience afterwards, or getting your name right on the letter when you take your car for a service or whatever. And this is I think such a good example of evidence where if you've got it right, your customers wouldn't be redeeming at that level if they didn't see some value. So it's really it makes us think about how important it is to get that value equation right and to make sure the customer understands it. So just before we move on to the next question, I just wanted to remind everyone on the webinar today. We've got quite a few questions actually that are starting to come in. So please feel free to click on the little Q&A icon and put any questions of your own that you have in there. Remember, probably a lot of the questions that might be going through in your mind are questions other people want to ask as well. So please do. So just moving on to the next question, and Britta, we'll ask you to kick off with this one, if that's okay. How can wholesalers use insight and data to anticipate customer needs and identify opportunities that can drive loyalty? How can this practically be used by wholesalers to reduce churn and create a more personalized, value-added experience for customers?
I mean, the amount of data that we have as marketers in this day and age is an absolute luxury compared to where we were, half a decade ago, or even compared to some, I suppose, sort of more offline areas. I think the risk with the amount of data we have is the sort of the overwhelm, or the using the data to find the stories or the numbers that back up the narrative that you think is correct. And actually to make this meaningful for your customers, to get good content on the back of it that touches the pain points of the customers, or to have good solutions for your e-commerce platforms, or whatever it is you're looking to do, you really have to have, it's back to basics marketing. Set your KPIs and determine what it is you're trying to do, and then measure against that at the end of your campaign or project or whatever it may be. So I think there is a real danger that we sort of we find the numbers that we think look good and add some assumptions to those, and then sort of plow on with our agenda. And I would probably argue that some of the best learnings come from, I don't know, getting to 80% of the data, enough that you can make educated decisions, and then combine that with the experience of your sales teams or your understanding of what the sector requires. There's a classic story of, you see a pair of shoes when you're browsing online, you click on them by accident. Maybe they drew you in because they're like the wackiest shoes you've ever seen. And the shoe seller, of course, on the other end is going, look how interested they are in these shoes. And you get served these shoes, for the next 2 weeks every time you log online. So I think there is a real danger with the data that if you don't overlay it with other things, other bits of information, other insights, then the risk is that you sort of, it takes you down a rabbit hole, and you end up wasting a lot of time on things that aren't really meaningful for the customers. And that negates the loyalty point, right? Because you're then presenting solutions that aren't actually to problems that they were looking to fix in the first place. And then the other obvious thing, I guess, on how it can practically be used to sort of reduce churn and create more personalized experiences, of course, is looking at, so as I said before, sector is a big one for us, using that data to really understand what is important to that sector, what products are they up trading or down trading on, have you made changes to the range that maybe are a reflection is the change to your pricing, like get that down to a sector level and mirror it against what you'd be expecting to see from that sector, because there will be sort of quiet stories coming out of that data if you spend time on that.
No, that's great. And I think you make such a good point there about, when personalization goes wrong and, you sort of click something, or like in our household, the kids have gone onto the iPad or something and done some shopping, and then I, get served up all this stuff which I have no interest in, and so on. So it's really good. The other point that I thought was very relevant that you made as well is that, whilst data is obviously useful and, it's great to dive into the numbers, it's that dovetailing it with the sort of lived experience that sits in people's heads is really important as well.
I think there's two things for me with data. Sorry, Gavin, really quickly. Is data's always in the past, right? It's a reflection of what you have done, not what you're going to. I mean, I know you can do predictive, but by and large, it's in the past. And the other thing is, it's only measuring what you're already doing. It's not going to tell you what you're not doing, so it's never going to be the full story, right?
Yeah, so true. Dave, what do you think on this question?
So yeah, I completely agree with Britta. I think there's a huge amount of data available to us at the moment, and I think that amount of data, can scare people. And looking at that data, I don't think you have to be that complex to make powerful decisions. I mean, I'm sure most of the people in the audience, the wholesalers, already have the raw data there. They just need to use it effectively. So I think even, you know, all ERP and e-commerce systems, you can drag data out of into Excel. And, you know, even with tools like that, you can do very simple analysis on them to see whether, you know, you're losing customers or something. So you could track customers' order frequency. So if someone orders once a week and now's order fortnightly, you know, it's a red flag. You know, you can have one of your sales team follow up and give that personal touch and see what's happening. You know, you can monitor order values. So if a dip happens in a customer's spend, it may suggest that they're splitting their order or moving to a competitor. And, you know, you just sort that data by last order date and see if any customers haven't ordered for a while, and, you know, try and re-engage with those accounts before they're fully lost. So I think that's sort of the first step if you're just starting off in your journey. But while that sort of basic data helps you respond to problems, you know, advanced analytics helps you anticipate them before they become problems. So here at Oporteo, we're working with leading UK universities to develop AI models. And these AI models can help analyze customer behavior by looking at order timings, frequency, browsing patterns. And because we're in B2B, we have a lot of data about our customers. So we can feed all of that data into AI, which produces something out. And so what these models can do, and what we're looking at, is being able to predict that churn early. So showing and flagging customers which are at risk, and optimizing your sales team outreach. So prioritizing which calls you should make, not based on gut feel, but also on data-backed insights from the AI. So say if a loyal food customer sort of stops buying your cleaning supplies but continues buying produce, our AI can, you know, help highlight this shift, and the sales team can go and investigate it.
Yeah, that's that. I mean, it's useful, and I wondered how long it was going to be today on this call before AI came up, and I think it's great. Great examples there where actually, you know, in a world where there's a plethora of data, one thing AI can do for us is actually get its head around it and actually, you know, make it useful. And I think those are great examples there, because I think, you know, we're right in the heart of retention. You know, customers moving off silently, but if you know it's happening, you can, and there's early warnings, there's a lot you can do about it. So that's really important. Chris Davies.
Yeah, goodness, it sounds like you're doing some clever stuff there, Dave. I think my opinion on that is, in saying that that's what you're doing, I imagine that could make a lot of people go, holy moly, we are nowhere near that. That's terrifying. But I think my perception, right or wrong, is that broadly speaking, your point around there being some cultural rejection of digital evolution in the boardrooms in this sector is still true. The market isn't quite as forward and as fast-paced as it could be, should be. Therefore, there is white space and there's opportunity. So at the very least, start, because, you know, there is so much that can be done by just getting moving on this. I think, again, remembering we're a marketing agency that supports, yes, in data analysis, but also then what we do with that. So it has a so what factor. As a business, we sit across a very wide and diverse, portfolio of data and insight. And that has all sorts of different attributes that, yes, have moments of transaction, but also purchasing behaviors and menu information, pain points, scrape social sentiment and reviews that enable us to look at the now, but also allow us to look with a bit more foresight, a little bit more farsight, and, you know, to venture into the world of futurology to try and get to that point of predictiveness. The team, and my team, I've got people that are infinitely cleverer than I'll ever be, are then using some of those AI tools to get to that really deep research, overlaying those different sources to find patterns, to find groups and audiences that sit around common pain points and sit around common need states, and then start building those relevant communication strategies accordingly. And it is really fascinating. Look, we live in a world now where content is dripped out, and I don't just mean direct targeted sales-led pushy content. I'm talking about supportive of a buyer's journey, stuff that would help you build awareness and moments of consideration rather than trying to drive towards conversion or transaction. And then with all that data and insight and all that segmentation and all that overlay, how do we then, to Britta's point, whether that's at sector level or deeper, start to build stories and narratives and bite-sized content that speaks to the need states of those audiences? AI is brilliant at helping us get a lot of the journey there from our perspective. So we are utilizing it, and I'd employ and implore everyone to do that. But with the caveat, of course, that you do need that human overlay to sense check. You do need that real world experience. You do need that touch in with those at the coalface who are speaking and liaising with customers on a day-to-day basis. And that sharpness can then get you to a really exciting and compelling strategy.
And that's really interesting. It's about, as you say, it's about getting that deep understanding of the need state and, what's going to push the right buttons with people. But I think it's quite interesting there that what you mentioned, Chris, is the whole aspect of the kind of future thinking, because we, as B2B buyers, we're changing all the time as well.
Yep.
And, competitors are upping their games and more products becoming available and different solutions. And actually, and our customers' businesses are evolving too. So it's about staying on top of that. Chris Palmer, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo a lot of what's been said up until now by the rest of the panel. Data and metrics are not the same thing as insight. My background, my career has been very much sitting in the same kind of world as Chris and David. If I could go away, lock myself in a dark room with loads of data and not come out from 6 months, I would be the happiest man alive. But that's not my job. And if you're going to get to the point where you're actually working and generating genuine insight, you've got to be bringing all that data together from more than one source. There is no one thing you can do. You can't just ask a survey. You can't just do the data analysis. You can't just run a focus group. Well, you can, but most questions are going to, or most kind of solutions are going to create more questions for you that you need to go and ask in a different way. So it is a process. It's not something that you do once and then that's it. You've got the magic silver bullet to go and run your business. It is something that you have to commit to, and it does go beyond the tables and it does go beyond the data analysis. And I think probably the talking would be the kind of key word that I would use and who you're talking to. So some of the guys have kind of hinted at this already, but talking to your customers as much as possible. And in our sector, that's both internal users, our sales reps, but also the external users. But they are not easy people to nail down. I mean, Britta's already hinted at that. They live very different lives to the rest of us that are working 9 to 5, and it's not like the last 5 years have made it any easier for them. So they don't tend to be people that are willing to complete surveys, and they don't tend to, they're very protective of the time that they have. So you've got to talk to your customers. You've got to have that ability to go and ask why, and why again, and why again, and really probe down to get to the really juicy stuff that explains what it is they want or why it is they behave the way that they do. Now, what we've done in our business is we've actually made that somebody's role. So historically, it was something that we were kind of crowdsourcing through from the sales reps, but actually it's a much more powerful thing to have someone. Cassandra sits in my team, who is the person that is the main source of contact for all users in terms of being the first line and second line support, but is also proactively going out into trade and spending time with customers, understanding them. And then we are able to bring that voice of the customer back into what we do, so that whenever we're having conversations about how the business should work and how the website should work, that we have that voice to go, well, no, that's not what customers are aiming for, or we haven't thought about this. So there's that element of talking to the customers, and that can be both in a kind of formal focus group, proper research depth interviews, but it can also just be about having a discussion with somebody, or using the social proof stuff that Britta was talking about earlier on. So there's that element of talking, but there also has to be that complementary element of talking within your business. And I think if you're going to go down this route, you have to think about how you do talk about data and how you do talk about insight within your business. Do you talk about it regularly? And more importantly, do you talk about it comfortably? And then do you do anything with it? To Chris's point earlier on, I hire curious people. That is the main thing I look for in any hiring process, because if you're curious, you're going to ask the right questions and you're going to get to the right answer. But when you're coming into a business that has been up and running for 50 odd years, has processes that have been there that long as well, you're not always going to have that elsewhere in the business. So how do you? I don't like the word data or the name data culture, because it kind of almost depersonalizes it. Everybody's got to take responsibility for that curiosity and asking the right questions. But how do you make sure that you have the right environment to have those discussions? We've talked about the C-suite being behind in that, but I think it goes right across most businesses. Who are particularly in an area like ours where everybody is so focused on getting through the day that you don't necessarily have the time to prioritize that kind of foresight, farsight stuff that Chris was talking about. Within that, then you also need that person who's going to pull it all together. So who is that person that is going to drive this? Who is that person that is going to take the various disparate strands that you have in terms of the various bits of data and the various bits of narrative and feedback that you have, and pull it all together into something cohesive that means something in terms of what you're trying to achieve as the business. Those people are unicorns. If you can find them, treat them well, and keep them, because they're really valuable people to kind of give that context and bring everybody and align everybody.
Well, that's great. Thanks, Chris. And I think what comes through really clearly there is that there's the insight, and data sort of work hand in hand, and you need to have both bits of it, don't you? So it's and Dave really highlighted some great examples there. We're actually using empirical data and stuff you get out of the back of the transactions on a website are very useful. But equally, as you say, you've got to talk to the customer and also get inside their heads and ask them, and it's a challenge to get that information. And then the real challenge is how you pull that all together, the data, the numbers, along with the more subjective stuff. So yeah, that's excellent. So I'm just conscious of time. We're moving on to our last question now. And this is just really where we're going to ask the team, what do you think are some of the common pitfalls in B2B wholesalers face with their e-commerce and digital strategy that impacts on customer loyalty? How can they avoid these, and what does good look like? So, so what are some of the pitfalls that we see out there? And maybe Chris Davies could ask you to start with this one.
Sure, and I'll be concise, Gav, because I think so much of what the conversation's led us through now is some of this stuff is naturally coming out. But I think a pitfall that we witness, and it's not just B2B wholesale, but given we're talking about that, I'll focus in on it, potentially becoming a little bit introspective and a little bit groupthink and concerning yourself only of your world without recognizing or remembering the world that we sit in and live around us. And, it feels very obvious to say, but think with that B2C mindset, knowing that your buyers are people too, and it's just a different hat they wear at different points in the day. So whether that's considering the world of an Amazon or a Deliveroo or an Uber does, I think it's fair to say that the digital e-commerce standard is set by some of those people that are presenting incredible experiences. How do we take the very best of that into our world? Thinking around friction, or rather frictionless, thinking about predictive analysis and presenting exciting opportunities in a way that's genuinely relevant to the buyer and their need states, and doing that with speed and proactivity. So it's not reactive and days, weeks, months behind, because you've, to Britta's point, its data is by its very nature often in the past if you're not careful. So how do we find techniques for all those things? The connecting the dots thing that Chris was just talking about was something I wanted to land here. But the final thing, and again, I feel like I landed it in my first contribution to today's webinar, is just finding the moments to sensibly overlay human interaction. The content of today is, of course, around digital e-commerce UX, and I respect and implore that, but it's just, we live in a market where it's still people first, it's still very relationship orientated. We need those things to come on the same journey and find the right points that are supportive of the buyer's journey. They cannot be forgotten. And the lens that I have is around remembering that and dovetailing them together, so it's enhancing relationships, not replacing.
Don't forget, people are people. Yeah, you're so right. Yeah. And just and again, yeah, briefly, because we're sort of getting towards the end of the session, we wanted to leave room for a few questions. Chris Palmer, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's really about how the e-commerce function is positioned within the business and ensuring that it's not siloed as its own discrete thing. It is, as I hinted at earlier on, it is the window into the business. It is the culmination of everything that everybody else does in the business then ends up in that buying experience that the customer is having through. And when something doesn't work online, it is very obvious to the customer. We have 4 pillars in our e-commerce strategy, some or 2 more, based on having the best UX we can, underpinned by the best infrastructure that we can. That will be part of, aligned with the e-commerce strategies of pretty much every B2C and B2B organization that's out there. The 4th pillar is probably what sets us apart, certainly from B2C, or a lot of B2C, which is, it has to be in the context of a business that is becoming more aligned and more focused on e-commerce as a sales channel within the business. Historically, certainly whenever we first set up the website, it was about how we needed to change that online experience to match a B2B food service environment. Now, 5 years on, we're getting the highest levels of growth on web. We are the single largest ordering channel in the business. There needs to be that better balance of the rest of the business making decisions and thinking about e-commerce as well as their day-to-day, what they would normally be thinking about, and how those 2 things interact. So that for me is the key thing of how you build e-commerce in at the bricks of what you're doing, particularly when you're in a very, very established business. And to tie it back to my last comment, in order to do that, you need to bring people on a journey with you, and to do that effectively, you need to be telling your data story.
No, it's great, and I think it's a good point. It's your e-commerce experience has to be a part of your business, not just a thing that sort of sits on the side of it and does something different. It becomes the heart of the business, and I think you're right. We sometimes see examples of businesses that just shove a website out there and hope like hell it's going to do a great job, and it won't. It's got to become. It's a part of your business. It's another extension of everything else that you're doing. Thanks. Over to you, Dave. What are your thoughts on this?
I think probably the main pitfall that I come across, or I have been trapped in the past, is focusing too much at that sort of point of sale only. So seeing your conversion rate at the checkout, looking at heat maps, seeing where people are going. But I mean, it's not just that. It's how you deal with the customer before and after. I mean, having a weak onboarding experience. I think we've all been there, where we downloaded an app, we've tried to get it to work, doesn't work, so we delete it. So, having that good onboarding experience, like walkthroughs, FAQs, all of that content on how to use these platforms so customers get the most benefits. And one of the things that we're working on at Oporteo at the moment is, interactive guides through there. So you lead people by the hand through the site so they can navigate it with ease in the future. So I think that's one of the things that we probably don't focus on as much as we do when you're doing that sort of sales one. And then conversely as well, after you make that sale, after the customer places the order, focusing on sort of the post-sales experience, the ability to return easy, give feedback, etc., see past orders. And I think that's probably, where I'd say the biggest pitfall is. So it's that whole journey through your website.
And becoming more and more important as websites do more for us and have more functionality and provide more services. We know some, B2B is often not just about buying stuff, it's about accessing your accounts and raising queries and returning things and all that. So you're so right, you've got to point out where it is. And I even argue that a lot of B2B websites have more to them than consumer websites. So it's a very important point that you make, Dave. Britta, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, just a couple of things to add to all the good stuff that's been said already. I think we talked already about making sure that your online experience matches your offline one. And if you wouldn't tolerate it offline, why on earth would you tolerate? So I think be critical, but I also think part of that is the ability to zoom out and sort of sometimes just look at, even outside of our sector, what is it that, who is doing this well? Who can you look to go, okay, these guys are setting the benchmark here. What can we learn from them? Amazon's the obvious example, but also, if you think about, I don't know, if you watch movies on Netflix and then you go to a different streaming service, you're like, why isn't it showing me the little clip when I'm choosing? Why doesn't it automatically go to the next episode? What's your e-commerce equivalent of that? What is it that you do when you place your order on Ocado or Sainsbury's or wherever it is? And what can you take away from those guys and learn from the retailers that do it really well? I heard someone at a conference once say that they had a chair in every single meeting room that was a different color to all the other chairs. And the person who sat in that chair had to be the voice of the customer in that meeting. And I know it has absolutely nothing to do with digital, but I thought it was a very clever little way of ensuring that, because I'm sure we've all sat through meetings where we come up with loads of great ideas and you walk out and you go, and actually at no point did anyone say, what does this mean for the customer? So kind of, finding ways to ensure that you take that walk in the customer's shoes. And then I would just say, don't be afraid of trying stuff. We had a good old colleague between us, Gavin, years ago, who said, don't let perfection get in the way of progress. Try some things. Sometimes you'll succeed and sometimes you'll learn. And if you're really lucky, you'll do both. But don't kind of like, this isn't going away. Don't use data as something to hide behind. Don't think this is something that's only for the 16-year-olds. Those days are gone. If you don't get with this now, you are eventually going to get left behind. So you can kind of either jump in and get excited and curious, to Chris's point, or you can wait until you're dragged into it or dragged completely out, I think would be my warning. That's a very stark note to end on. But it's meant to be a positive. It is meant to play into Chris's, this has to be an integrated part of what we do now. Digital is just too big to sit as a side note.
I think on that, Britta, the youngsters are a bit more data savvy than that, but they don't necessarily have the experience of the why and how business works. And that's the key to getting to the insight. It's not the data itself, it's the context in which it sits. So there is a superpower out there for those that maybe aren't the most data confident around the why and the context as well.
And if you can make it work for them, then you're generally in a good place. I think the thing for me with looking at the younger ones is that they are going to be the chefs of the future, the customers of the future. So if you all aren't tuned into what their expectations are going to be, you potentially leave it too late to play catch up.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think you make a really good point there, because the bus is already going, and if you're a wholesaler who's waiting in the wings and sort of hoping that you can carry on doing things the way you've always done, it's you're going to find yourself probably in a difficult situation, because there is just so much more advancement going on in the wholesale world. But I think importantly is not to be intimidated to make a start. I think, perhaps some wholesalers who feel that maybe they've been left behind, it's just all very overwhelming. And I think it's really important, to your point, Britta, be brave. Don't be afraid to get it wrong, and don't let perfection get in the way of good. You've got to have a go. And once you get on the bus and start traveling with it, you can then start tweaking the journey and so on. So thanks very much. I know we've had a great session this afternoon, and we've only got a few minutes left, but I think I've literally got time for one or two questions, which I think would be really useful. So there's quite a few questions that have come through, and I'm afraid we're not going to have time to answer them all. But if I just pick a couple from here, So this question has come through from, where's the best place to start if we've never really formally focused on retention before? We are a regional wholesaler with a small team and a limited marketing budget. So I don't know, Chris Palmer, I think I'm going to ask Chris and Britta Chris Palmer and Britta to answer this one. Chris, just very briefly, what are your thoughts? Where's a good starting point?
Probably a review of what information you do have access to. So what data can you get out of your ERP? Is there the ability to go and look at what your actual patterns are in terms of retention? Simple breakdowns of that by channel, by geographic area are going to be the most insightful, probably around that, and also by teams, depending on the setup. But if you've got different sales teams, they often work in very, very different ways, and you'll often see that there are particular patterns related to each team. But also have those conversations with your sales teams, have those conversations with your colleagues to talk about what the general consensus is on where you are with retention in the business at the moment, because you put those two things together. There's your hypothesis. We think this, and then go and see if the data backs that up, and if talking to customers actually backs that up as well.
Bit of evidence-based start there. And Britta, what's your suggestion for someone who's just jumping on this journey?
I think if you're talking about retention, I would say pick the key things for you and focus on really delivering. It's almost back to where we started of going, make sure you're true to your customer promise. Whatever your customer proposition is, make sure that that is sort of living and breathing throughout your business, because by the time when somebody potentially is frustrated and looking to go elsewhere, you might just have missed the opportunity for that retention. I still would get information from them, to Chris's point. So, it is always worth trying to understand why somebody has sort of switched off. But I think it's the difference between whether you're focusing on retention and keeping customers on board, or whether you are looking to bring back lapsed customers. Retention for me starts as soon as you've won the customer. So I think David mentioned about the onboarding process. You go to a hotel, your experience starts at the point of booking and all of that. But as soon as you walk into that reception, how are you being treated? Did they book you for the right thing? Does the room match what you saw online? Your onboarding process is the equivalent of that hotel lobby. So it starts right there. You can't leave it until somebody's frustrated before you start caring for them.
No, very good. And Chris, I think this is a question for you. Chris Davies, what's the right frequency of contact to stay top of mind without being pushy? So he has the dilemma of when do you become spam versus useful kind of thing.
Oh, tricky one. Look, I think historically there's been enormous amounts of fear about over communication and saturation and all those sorts of things. The truth is now we have so many channels at our disposal. We can be quite smart in how we use the total ecosystem of channels to make sure that you are serving and seeding things out in a way that's constructive, supportive, altruistic, without just being pushy and sales orientated. So consider the difference then, first and foremost, between what is pushy in sales, what is direct, and versus what is building a story, building a narrative, and making sure, again, you're being supportive against whatever your customers' need states are and pain points are. But to answer the question directly, I think you've got to split it in three ways. Consider what's the right frequency for an active customer, what's the right frequency for a warm prospect or lapsed customer, and then final category number 3 would probably be around cold leads. Gun to my head, I would say for an active customer, frequency needs to be weekly. Twice weekly would probably be okay. Just remember that for an active customer, they are spending enormous amounts of money for them, whoever they are, with you. And on that basis, they are engaged with what you're doing, what you're about, because you have significance and relevance to them. So weekly or twice weekly, as long as it's altruistic and supportive, is good. For a warm prospect or a lapsed customer, I would say fortnightly or every 3 weeks. If there's something a little colder, if you're going direct, around monthly. I'm sure others might have different views, but that's probably the advice we'd give.
That's great. I guess not a perfect science, but I think it's a good framework, and it certainly makes sense. I'll just squeeze in a last quick question. I think, Dave, this is an ideal deal. You're ideally placed to answer this one. Do you have any recommendations on how to make repeat ordering feel even easier for new customers and therefore more likely for them to reorder?
I think talking about reordering, you want to make it as easy as possible, but not mindless, if you know what I mean. You want, if the person keeps, you know, we can all have a past order on the screen and just have the reorder button, and you know, that's as quick as you can get. But people will start to stagnate with what they buy. You know, they won't have any product discoverability out there. So I think that, you know, it's having that ease of repeating order with sort of subtle friction on top of it. So maybe suggesting a couple of things to add on there. I think also one of the things that we're looking at as well is demand forecasting. So, you know, helping the customer know what quantities they should order as well. So not just having a past order and reordering the same quantity amount, but, you know, being able to feed that in, and, you know, that there are fairly standard algorithms that you can use, which, you know, see that it's more sunny next week. So, you know, you probably want more of these, and being able to explain that to the customer. So, you know, I think those are probably the, you know, the ideas that we would have around that.
That's great. Thanks very much. Well, I'm just conscious of time, and I guess we need to wrap things up now, but I think it's been great conversation this afternoon. And I think, you know, a huge thank you to our panelists, Britta, Chris, Dave, and Chris. I think there's been an enormous amount of knowledge and insight that you've shared this afternoon, and a lot of it is actionable, which I think is great. I think there's a lot that we can all take away from what's been discussed this afternoon. So thanks very much. And just a reminder to everyone on the call, if you do want to get in touch with anyone, our email addresses are up on the screens behind ourselves. So please give us a shout. And so, yeah, on a final note, also thank you to everyone who's attended the webinar today. Thank you very much, everyone. All the best, and goodbye.